All right, guys, so in this video, we're going to talk about reverb and delay. After, having your overdrives kind of dialed the way you want. It's kind of a really, really important thing, and I think a lot of times it can be a little bit misunderstood or overused even. So if you look here at my board, I have 2 different delays and 2 different reverbs, which might sound like it's a little bit overkill, or so I've been accused of before. But for what I do and for the kind of worship music that I play, it seems to really get the job done. So the first delay pedal that my guitar sees is this Strymon Brigadier. I really love this because it sounds kind of like a Memory Man, but it doesn't break and TSA doesn't steal it, and it's smaller. So this is what it sounds like. Here's the dry signal without it, and here it is on. So it's kind of a warm analog. Just a nice, really simple sounding delay. And the way I like to use it is I'll crank the repeats up pretty high, and then I have this big knob that I attach to it so I can kind of roll it with my foot. So most of the time, if I'm playing a section of the song, it'll kind of be off. If I'm playing chords or doing some sort of like picking line. But what I use this for a lot is for swells. I'll crank it up. You see when I drop the volume down, it just kind of holds those notes, but then I can control it with my foot. Which is just really, really, really practical for live use, and sometimes in the studio. Sometimes it's really cool to do things like, you end a song on a big chord, and you just crank it up, and it, kind of sustains while you tune up for the next song or whatever. So, I would, even though it's first in line, I would call that a secondary delay, because what it's doing is just kind of filling space when I need it to, or just creating ambience when I need that first swell. The next pedal I have, which is also a delay, is the Strymon Timeline, and this has really been kind of my favorite delay I think I've ever used. It's super easy to figure out and understand. And it sounds really, really good. I've used a lot of delay pedals over the years, and this is the first one that I'm just completely happy with. The way I use it is I have this little controller here, and I can kind of scroll up and down through a bunch of banks, and if I click on one, you can see that it says "To Where God." So I have all the, the BPMs and kind of delay settings for our songs in here, and we can go all the way up to like bank 42, and there's Back to the Start and Dance Floor for the tour we did with Martin. So it's really cool to be able to quickly get to a delay pattern, and you don't have to worry about tapping it or doing anything like that. I can pull it up, and there we go, for the cross. And there's the the delay patch for it. There's a ton of different delay settings in here, which, if you have a timeline, you can get into all that yourselves. There's really no point to get into everything that one pedal can do in this video. But if you're just looking for a really, really great, easy to use delay, then the timeline is really it. I mean, it's got all the features. It sounds just incredible. I should say too that at this point on the board, I start running in stereo, which is a huge thing for your tone. A lot of people ask, is stereo really, really better than mono? And while, things are certainly all personal preference, try taking, your iPod in your car or something and, plugging the cable out halfway and only getting, one side of the recording, and then, plug it all the way back in, and there's, again, both sides. It's kind of the same thing with your guitar. Mono can be this very cool, direct kind of sound. But when you go stereo, you can still get that direct sound, but now all of a sudden you have the option of making everything sound big and wide. And delays and reverbs really help emphasize the point in stereo. So just in case you're curious, you are hearing these delays in stereo. I'm not panning back and forth or doing anything weird with them. It's just straight up, but you're getting both sides of this pedal. So that's the setting for the cross. If you're curious, there's a website called the Church Collective that has all my timeline presets, and I believe we'll be trying to make them available here as well. So you can download all the BPMs and the sounds that I use from this thing. Next, we move on to reverb, which is also in stereo. And reverb, I think, is kind of this essential that makes things really, really fun for me and really cool, especially in terms of my in-ear monitors and things. A lot of in-ears can sound really, really sterile. And adding reverb is a really, really great way to kind of give you back that room feel of, your amp's behind you on stage and you've got the rest of the band in with you. So a couple different options I have for reverbs. Eventually I'm going to end up syncing these pedals together, and when I go to preset on the delay, it'll go there on the reverb, but I don't have that happen. But I don't have that wired up that way quite yet, just for reasons. So a couple different reverbs. This is just kind of something really, really simple. Here it is off, and here it is on. You can hear it's just kind of a small room plate, and it just adds just a little bit of room to my tone. There it is dry again, and here it is with the reverb again. It's subtle and may not jump out in a mix, but again, in-ears or even certain recordings, just that little bit of verb can really make things pop. The second one I have here is the cloud setting on this the Big Sky, and this is kind of a bigger, much more dramatic reverb. Lots of space, lots of sustain. Kind of takes a while to disappear, and this is something that I love to use for volume swells. Again, I'll crank up the Brigadier again, and the timeline is kind of always on. So you pull them all together, and you can get these really great swells out of them. Just sounds really big and ambient and pretty. One thing I would not recommend using that kind of reverb for is, like a big rock and roll part. It just kind of makes everything super blurry. So be careful with how much reverb you use. Use too much and your guitar just disappears in a wash of noise and static. But use, correctly with a little bit of finesse, and you can get these just really big, swirly sounds. And then the last patch I have here is it's again kind of a bigger reverb, similar to the last patch you heard, but it's just a different setting. It's a little bit brighter and doesn't it doesn't decay quite as long. And that's just to have a different flavor. If I don't want something that's so big and ominous, I can still have a big reverb sound that doesn't just take over everything. I should say, too, a great feature about this particular pedal is the ability to control the tone and the low end separately, which I've found to be super important. A lot of times, if you use a reverb and it's really big, sometimes the low end just gets so cluttered it takes over your guitar no matter what, or it can kind of create this weird like flubby rumbling in your amp. And with this pedal, you can, you can control the tone of it, but as well, if I go to this first parameter here, you can see that. Let's see if I can get it to change. You can see it says low end, and then I can pull it out, or I can add it, or you can kind of have it in the middle. So that's just kind of a really, really handy option to have for this, rather than, jacking up the tone and just having this super bright reverb. You can have, this big sound that just doesn't completely take over. And then the last reverb pedal I have is just, faithful old Boss RV5 for just the mod setting. And it's super bright and kind of hissy, and I just kind of love the way it sounds for, again, very specific parts, like Forever, where it's just it just kind of creates his own sound, and it's just big and noisy and out there, and it almost becomes a little bit of an overdrive in the way that it sounds a little dirtier when you add that effect on it. So that's just kind of a great simple reverb that I like to use, just to kind of get a bit of a crazy tone. You can certainly use it to get, more relaxed, more subtle reverb tones, like the first one on the Big Sky I showed you. But since I have the Big Sky, I like to use that other one for something a little more crazy.